In the House, it is the judge, Chief Justice Mr. Randolph, or Judge Randolph, Justice Randolph. I've been admonished for saying Mike this morning, Judge. I hope I haven't offended you.
Paul, I tell people call me Mike all the time. Just don't call me Michael. That's what my mama used to call me when she was mad at me.
You knew that you were in trouble when she said that, didn't you?
That was it.
Well, there's a lot of things to talk about, but, I had a very interesting conversation with an amazing guy, Burl Cain, this week on the air, Department of Corrections. And what I love about this guy, and I think, he has a history of doing this, and that's one of the reasons he's got that job, is thinking out of the box. Don't tell me it can't be done. So he's reached out in a lot of different ways. You and I have talked, and he is with him also as far as the drug courts are concerned. And I know that's one of the things that you see every single day. You know how important this is. And speak to that, because I guess we give it another try this year. I'll ask you about as far as are there bills and are they proceeding through the process. But your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, your description of Burl Cain, he's more than amazing. He's an outstanding corrections official, and he is making big changes, positive changes. And everyone needs to support Burl. We are working with him. I know that Greg Snowden, who's with me today, who heads up Director of Administration of Courts, met with Burl yesterday on reentry courts, which is a new concept that there's bills on the legislature where we're going to try to start out with some pilot courts and probably about 3, and see if we can't assist corrections on reentry of these prisoners. Most of the people that I deal with presently, which you asked about, was the intervention courts. That happens up front. That happens before anybody goes to parchment. Again, typically what happens, somebody, say, a 22-year-old steals a purse out of a car. They get caught, get charged. They're a drug addict. The lawyer talks to the DA. If the DA thinks that person might be a good candidate, it cannot be any kind of serious crime. And if the defense lawyer and the DA thinks it's a good idea, they go meet with the judge. The individual's interviewed, and then it's determined whether they'd be eligible to participate in a drug court. If they're selected, after that, they have to pay so much a month. They have to pay for their own drug test. They have to maintain jobs. And at a cost to the taxpayers of about $1,200 a year for that individual. That program lasts about 4 years, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, but about 4 would be the average. So that person is a taxpayer, employed person, home with their family. Instead of setting up at parchment, costing the taxpayers about $19,000 a year. You do the math, Paul.
Yeah.
People tell me you're a good mathematician.
I don't know who told you that, but I can do that. One's an easy. That one was an easy one. I don't have to go back to trigonometry to figure that one out.
No, sir.
But it's the same thing on all of these, and we were talking to him about it yesterday, and everything that he's even talking about starting a barber school. We have a welding school and things such as that. But the fact is, if we can turn somebody's life around, from the court system to when they do get in prison, it's. I don't want to be selfish about it, but it certainly is better on taxpayers. But again, it saves a life of a lifetime behind bars.
Well, not only for that individual, but many of them have families, and so they're there to be a father or a mother, or maybe a mother that gets pregnant will have a drug-free baby. That saves the taxpayers $750,000. Over the lifetime of a child. But just to give you an example, in last year, fiscal year 2022, incarceration savings caused by drug courts, $23 million. Since the year 2012, drug courts have saved the taxpayers of this state over $500 million 586,000.
You actually say we saved, because of that, we saved nearly $23 million just last year.
In that one fiscal year. So we're talking about a program, and I think last year we got about $7 million to operate the courts. Well, I sat down and asked the staff to study. I said, what's the cost to operate these courts? Well, it was determined it cost $12 million to operate them. But if we can get $12 million given to fund these drug courts, then it's our belief that we're going to save, I don't know, 40, how much is it? $7 million. That incarceration it's about triple easily.
So we can laser in on this one, Justice. What we need is more funding. Is that going to, how much of an expansion will this be as far as the courts is concerned across the state?
Well, what we're trying to do, tied in, I attended the State of the State speech yesterday, and two of the things talked about, and has been talked about regularly, it was talked about by the governor, talked about by the legislature, both from Speaker Gunn, Lieutenant Governor Hoseman, are talking about mental health issues with the state of Mississippi and the federal government. One of the things we're trying to do is open up 8 mental health courts. What we find out on mental health issues, that same person might be off their medications. It's typically a person that's off medications, and they're walking down the street and they steal a purse, and all of a sudden they're in the criminal justice system. Well, they got mental health problem. If they're on their drugs, they don't do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it's critical that they're accountable to somebody. And that's what drug courts are about, is accountability, is making these individual participants accountable to each other, to their counselors, and to judges. And of course, on the regular drug court side, I mean, your choice is you can either do right or you can go to Parchman. It's real simple.
Well, and there are so many programs. I think we mentioned this yesterday. There are so many different avenues to help people out in the prison system now because of Commissioner Kane, and they need to take advantage of that one way or the other, because sometimes you never know what's kind of 5 or 6 years from now what happens as far as politics are concerned. The reentry courts, is that something we have now? Or
not in the state. We've had federal entry courts. My classmate, former federal Judge Keith Sterrett, who started drug intervention courts in Mississippi, also began reentry courts in the federal court system. And so that's been the model for Mississippi's in the federal system.
I got you.
Burrell's been working with Keith, and who's now a senior federal judge, and others, to figure out how do we do that in state court.
Chief Justice Mike Randolph, who's Chief Justice Mississippi Supreme Court in the House, and I want to ask you: is there a bill with a number on it in House and Senate that is moving through the legislative process?
There is in the House. There's House Bill. Let me put my glasses on, Paul.
That's okay. That's all right.
House Bill 694.
694
is one of the bills, and that has been was put in by Representative Creekmore and Chairman Bain of Judd B, and that's for a $12 million appropriation.
I want to ask you about one of those bills that the aforementioned, just the name you just mentioned, Nick Bain. We'll talk about that, and also just to ask you about medical marijuana too. What is this going to do to the system as far as the court, where people are in prison now for some type of violation? What have other states done, state Supreme Courts done? How do you mitigate what is the new law and what was the old law from the viewpoint of the distinguished Chief Justice of the Mississippi Supreme Court, Justice Randolph? That coming up next. When we last left you, we were talking about a couple of things, and let me get to these. House Judiciary B Chairman, who you alluded to, Nick Bain, has House Bill 630. This might be one of those things that you cannot comment on, I'm not sure, but it would allow former felons who've had their crimes expunged or removed from the criminal record to register to vote. Now, I think immediately people say you do the crime, you got to do all this and this and this. But, I mean, sometimes this could be 20, 30 years ago, and they're an exemplary citizen. In Mississippi, and by the way, in 2009, the AG at that particular time, Jim Hood, expanded this list. Arson, armed robbery, bigamy, bribery, carjacking, embezzlement, extortion, bad checks, shoplifting, and the list is long, and I won't go over all of them. But let me cut it down to the chase here. Unlawful taking of a motor vehicle and things such as that. For someone to have their suffrage restored in Mississippi, and only in Mississippi, not in the other 49 states. In the other 49 states, if you do the time, if you're out and you are an exemplary citizen, not student but citizen, then it automatically is you can vote. Mississippi is the only state that requires legislative action to regain the right to vote. You've got to find somebody to have their suffrage restored. A lawmaker has to introduce a bill on their behalf. 2/3 of the legislators, lawmakers in both chambers, have to agree to it. Person has to become a politician for this. In Bain's proposal, people convicted of a felony who have the crime successfully expunged from their record would automatically be allowed to register to vote. Now, your thoughts?
Well, you are asking me a question that I can't answer.
I kind of figured that, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
Our limitations are to only not give any type of advisory opinions, and we are limited to ruling on cases and controversies.
I got you.
So what would happen, Paul, is let's say the bill gets passed. Then if somebody wants to contest it, then they can go ahead and file some kind of action to set it aside or whatever. And then if that squabble ends up in a court, then we sit down, study it, and decide what this state's going to do in that particular instance. So I apologize, but
That's right.
I'm not trying to be evasive.
No, I understand. Whenever I have a Supreme Court judge on, and we've had so many over the years, over the decades, I expect that. But now, to be honest, and we've had you on for quite a few times, I get more out of you than I normally do. FBI special agents and Supreme Court judges are the hardest to interview sometimes, but you have been a delight, at least going as far as you can. I want to push this one on the medical marijuana because I mentioned that beforehand.
Paul,
because that kind of changes it. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me back up on one thing because I tripped over myself in the first segment, and I want to make sure this number gets out to the public. The actual savings for that $12 million investment we talked about, we need a $12 million appropriation. We believe that the projected savings for fiscal year 23 will be $59,132,800. So that's a 5-to-1. You get 5 times your money's worth with that $12 million appropriation. And I think it was just critical. The other thing I wanted to mention also is that Kevin Haran, you asked about the reentry course. And Kevin Haran has House Bill 907. 907 is the one that deals with reentry course. And I apologize for interrupting.
That's okay.
That note's just so important.
Well, yes, it is, and I hope the legislators in both House and Senate take that into consideration. Let me go back to medical marijuana again. How does that, looking at other states and what they do, because a lot of people have asked me that, what happens to the people who are in prison now? Is it mitigated in any way? Is that brought back up? But your thoughts on how the legalization of medical marijuana, which seems to be something that's going to happen as far as that next to the last step will be today, because everybody's talking about the House and Senate's going to agree on a bill. Then it'll be up to the governor. He has 5 days, minus a Sunday, to go on and vote for that or sign that. So how does it affect the court system in our state?
Well, until the bill's final, it'd be almost impossible for me to speculate because there's going to, Well, I said there's going to be. I don't know how they're going to get the bill out. I agree with you that anyone that can read the newspaper and talk to folks know there are bills are going to be presented to the governor. They're going to get together and present a bill. The exact numbers nobody knows at this point, but it seems like that at least all three branches are working toward trying to get this together to have a true medical marijuana bill. And hopefully they'll get together and that will work. Now, as far as the fallout on the other side, if you're dealing truly with medical marijuana, I don't know how many other people that it's going to affect. I mean, you're asking me what would happen to somebody that's getting marijuana for medical purposes who once had a marijuana conviction. I don't know. Again, case and controversy.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out, but I really don't. I'll be honest with you. The demands on me personally don't allow me a whole lot of time to go find out what's happening elsewhere until I have a case. And then I'm going to study it. But
I got you.
I really haven't. As
one of the justices who voted that the congressional districts were enough to say that this bill this couldn't go through, now seeing what happened and the bill's taking a tremendously better turn as far as a better medical marijuana bill. Do you feel personally some vindication on that?
I don't feel vindication. I am satisfied that we studied the topic correctly. We made the right decision. I think it was verified that you talked to other former justices that agreed it was the correct decision. And you always got dissenters. That's fine. But I am pleased that the legislature has seized the opportunity. But two things come out of that, Paul. Not just the medical marijuana, redistricting came out of that as well. I had warned about redistricting in the past, and the problems with it. And fortunately, the legislature has redistricted. And that will allow, instead of federal courts controlling our elections and our districts and all that, the legislature has done that. And they're to be congratulated on getting that done.
I'll ask this, and again, I don't know. I have no idea what area I'm crossing over into. Is there any free legal advice for the legislators, the lawmakers, as they consider toward the end of the session the initiative process?
There is. What I want to say maybe is people reach out and say, "What do you think about this? What do you think about that?" So you just had Angela Cockerham. Angela's a perfect example. She called me the first year I was chief, which was 3 years ago. I think I become chief 3 years ago, the February 1st. She called me one day when they worked on the criminal justice reform bill and said, "Would you look at this bill with us?" And I said, "Well, I'll take a look at it. I don't know what I'll say. I'll look at it." And she said, "When can you do that?" And her and Jason White were sitting over at the Capitol. And I said, "Well, would 15 minutes be fine? I'll walk across there and we'll look at it." And that particular bill had some changes in it that were not substantive law. It was who was going to appoint certain people, whether it was going to stay with the court or whether it should be done by other people. And so I responded, here's why it's a good idea the court does it, as opposed to let someone else do it. And so I did answer those kind of inquiries. I can tell you in general terms, people say, "What do you think about this or that?" But we're pretty careful about what we say because we never know when it's going to come up before us.
It's always a tremendous pleasure, sir, and privilege to have you on the air with us to share this with people across the universe, and we thank you. The Supreme Court Chief Justice Mike Randolph, and we thank you so very much. I hope you're feeling fine, sir.
Paul, I feel fine. And one thing we didn't talk about today is I just talked to a county court judge in Hinds County, and due to our efforts, we closed 25,000 cases in the last few
That